If someone had told you before the World Cup that Brazil were going to make history, what would your first thoughts be? A sixth World Cup, goals in double figures, a clean sheet over the competition, or an artistic demonstration of ball mastery? Many of us would dare not think about the darker side of historical achievements. Brazil were the first host to lose by more than 3 goals in a World Cup, their heaviest defeat in international football, and they are the first team in the World Cup to fall behind by 5 goals within 29 minutes. These are some of the damning statistics. The list can go on. I always said Brazil cannot afford to win ugly, neither can they afford to lose beautifully. Brazil needed to win the tournament in style, to play the Brazilian way with flair and zest, the way we've all come to know and love. Brazil lost ugly. Would it have been better for the host if Chilean striker Mauricio Pinala's final strike had gone in against Brazil rather than taking an annihilating 7-1 battering from Germany? Perhaps, but this is why it is fitting. Let's face it, Brazil were poor. Rarely we saw glimpses of brilliance, and rarely for a Brazilian side is not good enough. The World Cup was Brazil's chance to shine. If there was ever a better time to rebrand their status on the global stage, it was now. It was also a perfect opportunity to bury the nightmare that lingered from the 1950 World Cup finals, not to add another mind-throbbing tragedy to their history. This wasn't Brazilian football. Their fate had been slowly etched for years, and this day had been long coming. Somewhere over the past few years, the concept of Brazilian football had become deeply dormant. The samba the Brazilians entrenched into the game had stepped away, almost as if it had been pushed from a cliff and occasionally caught gripping onto a rock or a branch on its way down. Now it has fallen. What those players from the 1960s and 70s such as Zico, Pelé, Garrincha and Socrates had achieved, and the philosophy which they proudly champion, has become nothing more than a figure from the past. Did the current national team forget whose footsteps they were following, and the blueprint of artful football those legends trademarked the footballing world with? Why didn't the host play their game? Where was the samba? Let's take a look at where it went wrong. Firstly, Scolari's tactics relied heavily on Neymar. He was the key player. The squad knew this, as did the oppositions. Each time the ball was played long from David Luiz, or across the box from Hulk or Marcelo, it was done with a view to scout out Neymar's forward runs. Most Brazilian sides of the past have nurtured more than one key player. Take the 2002 team for example, which included the likes of Ronaldinho, Rivaldo, Ronaldo, Carlos, Cafu and Denilson. The problem with building a team around one player is that in their absence, Plan B is doomed to fail. In the case of this World Cup, a tactical revamp was too late to fix up against an orderly German side. Secondly, Scolari appeared to be overly loyal to his players at the expense of the team's well-being. Although Fred boasts a superb domestic goal-scoring record, he was unquestionably a lumbering mistake. Scolari's reaction to Fred's goal against Cameroon said it all. A big gulp, a wipe of the brow, and a sigh of relief. Brazilians don't hope their strikers will score, they expect them to. The very fact that they are chosen to wear the infamous yellow and blue strip is enough to qualify them for the job. But not Fred. He was a passenger in Neymar's car, a car with limited petrol and a locked steering wheel. Brazil were not without options in attack either. Ronaldinho would have been a better choice over Fred, with his vast amount of experience and his ability to create a moment of genius out of nothing. Thirdly, this Brazilian side appeared to play more defensively in their style. It was as if they went out not to lose as opposed to win. Maybe they subconsciously knew that their ammunition was always running low, or perhaps this was simply poor tactics. Against Germany, the backline were defending far too high up the pitch. This was easily exploited by the Germans, while huge holes in the midfield allowed the likes of Özil and Khedira the freedom to penetrate Brazil's final third. In previous games, David Luiz's antics went unseen, but not that night of 7. He was the talk of the show, and for all the wrong reasons. Firstly, his long balls over the top and woeful clearances not only became predictable, but were mostly misplaced, costing the host possession of the ball. Secondly, his forward runs left gaping holes in the defence, with Dante left to cover his shortcomings. Perhaps the excitement of scoring a wonder free kick against Colombia got to him. Maybe he wanted to be the one to carry Brazil through, as Neymar had been doing until that point. What's worse is that video footage shows that Luiz made no real attempt to chase back and defend when caught out of position. Thirdly, Luiz's leadership skills must be poked at. As vice-captain, surely he should know a thing or two about organisation and structure. There is no question that Luiz can lead through emotion. His passion and pride for Brazil was evident, but his strategic leadership to helm the back line was appalling to say the least. Fourthly, Brazil buckled under the psychological pressure of playing a World Cup at home. Many of the players frequently broke down in tears, burdened by the immense weight of the nation's hopes and dreams. This wasn't a Brazilian team sure of itself. The conditions of hosting the World Cup were ill-fated from the get-go, with the people taken to the street for very, very real concerns. Finally, many of the characteristics of Brazilian football were missing from the current squad. Brazil played with great caution. They didn't play fast and secure, with unpredictable and creative offensive attacking movement like many of the Brazilian teams before them had. There is a need to go back to the basics. What made Brazil the best? The first is technical astuteness. We have come to know Brazilian players as technically very sound, possessing finely tuned ball manipulation skills, control and tricks. Every player on the pitch plays comfortably with the ball at their feet. Players are naturally creative, and while tactically very sharp, they also like to do simple things with flair. Number 2, work ethic. The Brazilians are physically adept. Their high level of fitness enables them to do the work necessary to supply positive numbers around the ball, to play with speed and rhythm, both offensively and defensively. 3, possession. The Brazilians like to keep possession of the ball. Possession is ensured by the proper position of supporting players away from pressure. Passes are usually played diagonally in close proximities, so as not risking losing possession. Rarely you'll notice frequent balls being delivered in the air from defensive positions to the attackers. 4, switching the play. The Brazilians like to switch the ball early and often away from pressure in its defensive half and look to penetrate from the opposite flank. Much of their counter-attack is driven from the flanks. Players on the wings like to make the pitch as wide as possible to give them the space they need to use their skills to attack. 5, movement. There is also a sense of constant player circulation, with players constantly rotating to fill the void and cover as they look to penetrate. Brazilians move together with and without the ball, just like birds in a flock. 6, flair. Finally, often the final penetration stays on the ground, with the creative flair we're also familiar with. This is where individual technical skills, creativity and finesse come to fruit. These are the features of the Brazilian game we had hoped to see. Brazil showed little doses in each department. Scolari, refusing to adapt, got his team and his tactics wrong. In fact, in a pre-match press conference against Colombia, Neymar himself declared that the Brazilians will not be putting on a show to entertain the people, but instead will do whatever it takes to win. This is not the Brazilian side we know. Brazilians love to entertain their fans. Brazilian football will always be known for its masterful art. The flair, the freedom, skill, joy and passion will never be forgotten. Who knows if that game will ever return? Perhaps the children of today and in future generations will have to dig through the archives to taste some of that flavourous football. Maybe the days of the beautiful game will go listed as the good old days. This conclusion is hard to accept. I like to believe that the beautiful game is not dead from its long fall, but instead lays in a coma, rebuilding silently, awaiting the right medicine to wake up. But an injection of philosophical prowess, followed by a dose of tactical and technical astuteness, is not enough. The remedy to awakening the Samba is easier said than done. A complete revamp is called upon. It's time to move past the misery and pain, scrap what has happened, call everyone around the table and begin relaying the foundations by rethinking the notion of Brazilian football. The beautiful game will return. It now becomes a question of will and desire. Perhaps this painful lesson may turn into the country's biggest stumbling block on the path to recovery.